What is going on, everyone? Tim from Tearfon Orbital. So, I would like to do a little bit more of an in-depth walkthrough on this commission that I recently completed. There's a lot going on in both the chassis and the pommel for this build, so I wanted to go over what my process was for it. And I also obviously would like to talk about the hilt a little bit, right? This is for a TXQ Boone Kestis lightsaber. I believe that the client purchased this directly from TXQ and then had it shipped to a gentleman by the name of Frank Starkiller. He's pretty active on Facebook. He sent it to Frank for some weathering, and Frank did a really, really phenomenal job weathering this hilt. It really, really looks great. It looks really gnarly, really, really beat up. It's hard to believe it came from. It was originally TXQ hilt. It looks awesome. So I do want to talk about the hilt and the install. So to be completely transparent and frank, never was a fan of this lightsaber design. It's long. I'm not a fan of long hilts. It just never really aesthetically grabbed me. I mean, obviously, until I put my hands on it, it's a super unique hilt. I think it looks better weathered. So yeah, really, really rad. So in this particular hilt, we've got a huge pommel. And the first thing, I'll pick it up now. So the first thing, the pommel on this is giant, right? This whole section unscrews. So I initially, one of my first thoughts was, well, it would be kind of cool. It's not Canon. We don't see this in the Canon hilt, but it would be cool to have some kind of shine through or animation happen in the pommel here, right? That was where my first thought went. So we had to figure out how to tackle that, and we did. I did, obviously, and the effect looks really, really cool. But yeah, here it is, super long, really, really long hilt, right? So let's come up top. Actually, before we do that, I will talk about the chassis because there is a lot going on the inside of this hilt. Okay, so let's come into Fusion. This is the chassis. Well, it's the chassis, it's all kinds of stuff, right? So this is the chassis that I designed for the hilt, but I did want to also include what I did for the switches and in the pommel, right? So let's start down here at the pommel. This is the Speakerpod that I created to rest and live in the pommel, right? So it looks a little wacky. Obviously, it's not your typical Speakerpod because I wanted to also incorporate a circular LED array. Kim's Cantina has these. This one in particular I did not purchase from Kim's. It's a little bit smaller, but it does sit down in this chamber. Okay, so I wired up that circular Neopixel array, brought my leads up into this area. Then I put my speaker down on top of that. The speaker just kind of rests on this upper lip. And that's why you see these holes down here. This is for sound venting, right? So we don't want to close off that speaker completely, but I also want to make sure that I've got enough room for that Neopixel ring, right? So the speaker then sits on top of all of that. Then this guy comes and pushes down on top of the speaker and everything is glued in place, right? So obviously, I had to do some sort of pogo pin connector because this is a Speakerpod, right? But I also had 3 other conductors that I had to worry about because of that Neopixel array. So I did not have any 5-rail PCBs on hand, so I actually did use a 7-rail PCB from Stardust Sabers, and that's what sits in this lip, right? And that just lives in the pommel. Then on the chassis side, I've got the other end of that 7-rail PCB that sits on the bottom of the chassis, right? Here is the chassis. Sorry, it's hard to navigate in Fusion. I don't know why I can never get the hang of it. So here's the chassis, pretty agreeably heavy on this guy. We've got a battery tray here, no speaker, obviously. There's a speaker pod. Greebly's all over this thing. The Proffieboard does sit in this. Geez, man, I cannot navigate in Fusion. It's so hard. I need to figure out a better way to do that. So the Proffieboard sits in this tray, does slide up underneath this lip. Really easy to get at, both USB and SD card. And then, of course, so this chassis, it is a static chassis. It is held in place with a set screw to the upper part of the hilt. I also made a switch holder for this hilt. The onboard switches are decent. They're plunger spring type switches, so we needed some kind of tactile holder on the inside of the hilt. So that's what this is, and I also just incorporated the PCB emitter holder into this as well, right? So it's all just one piece, right? Nice and simple. Let's come up top. Here is the hilt again. So let's talk about how to use this guy. So you can kind of see that Speakerpod part was printed in clear translucent resin. So you can kind of see it peeking through in the bottom there. I wanted to make sure that we see a little bit of it because we have some light diffusion that's going to cause some cool animations down there. So pommel unscrews. There's that 7-rail PCB that I mentioned. Okay, so that just kind of lives inside of the pommel. And then to get at your chassis, you just unscrew this part of the grip. And there is the chassis. So I did a pass of Spanish copper rub and buff on this guy, and also just some Tamiya weathering pigments just to make it look a little bit more used and weathered. And that's it. No kill switch in this build. You are the kill switch. You just place your battery in and that turns the hilt on. So let's get a battery, okay? Flat part of your battery is the negative side. We want to make sure we're putting that in spring side negative. And that's it. So we don't have an audible cue because we don't have a speaker connected to this currently. So once you get your battery in, you want to screw in your grip, okay, until it stops. And then you take your pommel, screw your pommel in. And there, once you make a connection, obviously you're going to see there is that lit speaker pod. So we've got some cool animations down there, okay? Let's come down to the bottom. So there are two switches here, a top and a bottom. The top switch is your main, the bottom is your aux. And there's that lit, animated thing in the pommel. So I did all kinds of you know, every font's got a different animation for that. There we go. Just do something a little different. Again, you don't see the hilt like this in Canon. But, you know, me being me and being completely extra, and I just wanted to try something different. I've not yet seen anyone do that, so I think it looks kind of cool. I think it's a cool effect. So let's put a blade in it and do a quick demo, right? So there is a blade plug in here. This is my blade plug. I did that for the demo. Sorry, I did that for the glam shot, so let's take that out. There's a set screw up top here. There's a silver hex set screw. Take your blade, rest it on those PCB pins, and then tighten your set screw. And you're ready to go. Nope. Not tight enough, Tim. So, God, this thing's big. It's long.
I must be cautious wherever
That's what she said. So yeah, all different animations on here. So one of my, it was interesting to see how well the resonance and how well the speaker could perform in this Speakerpod because I've got that Neopixel ring down there. Now I've done Speakerpods or chassis like this before where there's like a single Neopixel holder in front of the speaker and it never really impeded on sound. But given that this was a little bit bigger, I think the placement of the holes that I designed really helps. It sounds great, right? Really, really cool. And then we've got that animation down there. Completely unnecessary, but you know, that's par for the course for me, right? So that's all we got. Some people were asking what in God's name is in that pommel. So I wanted to go over a little bit more detail and talk about what I did for this one. So if anyone has any questions about this particular install or my thoughts on the hilt, please don't be a stranger to the client. Thank you very much for trusting me with another one of your builds. And for everyone else, thanks for the support. And with that being said, may the force be with you, always. Thanks for watching, everybody.